This is Professor Germano Schwartz from the University of La Salle and United Metropolitan Faculty of Sao Paulo in Brazil, whose main fields of research are law and art, social movements, sociology, and sociology of law. We are very grateful to him for having accepted to be interviewed. Thank you, Professor.
I thank you, Milagros, Ainhoa, and Lorena for trying to make this interview with me, and I try to answer your questions.
So, yeah, I'm Lorena from the Basque Country, and I am interested in literature and law.
I am Ainhoa Martínez from the Basque Country in Spain also, and I'm interested in the field of new social movements.
I am Milagros from Peru, and I am interested in legal education and sociology of law.
Like I have said, I am interested in law and literature, and I wanted to ask you, first of all, how did you arrive to this link between law and literature? Have you read something about it before, or it came to your mind like in a natural way? Because we know that you have two books, Law and Literature and Rock and Law, the two that are here, Direito and Rock, and Direito and Literature. And how was the process to...
Okay, law and literature first, because the first book that I wrote about law and literature was published in 2006 in Brazil, and it was about literature, law, and constitution. Why I did that? Well, I need to explain first my background, I guess. The problem is that in Brazil, since from the 90s of last century, we start to discuss the role of law in society and how the law could help us as a society in order to make us not a better society, but a more developed society. In the sense, in the 90s in Brazil, influenced by these very famous authors from Europe like André Germano and others, we start to notice that the law is not only the positive law. This is the first appointment. The second one is that, at least from the Brazilian patterns, from Brazilian situation, one professor it was very important for us. He was born in Argentina, and his name is Luis Alberto Vará. Luis Alberto Vará was, let's say, the first, not the first, but the most important author in Brazil to combine law and art. Vará was a refugee of the military dictatorship in Argentina. The funny thing is that he went away from Argentina to Brazil, where a dictatorship was still on at that time. But he wrote a book about, I don't know if you know, in Europe, but the name of the book is something like that, the Lady Flower and her two husbands. That's a famous novel in Brazil. And he made a joke about this Lady Flower as the Lady Law and its two husbands, or two wives, I don't know. This is the first book, as far as I remember, connecting law and literature in Brazil. It was published like in 82 or 83 or something like that. That was the first time I heard about it. Of course, that I was very young at the time. I had like 8 years, I guess. But Vará, for one of the things that happens in life, was the supervisor of my thesis supervisor. So when I start to write my thesis, which was about human health and law, I'm always keeping some kind of communication or conversation with Luis Alberto Vará. And he was always telling me, forget Lumen, try to connect law with life and everything else. So I finished my PhD in 2002, 3, and after that I started to play some video games because I was tired to make research. No, I'm joking, but my next step was to follow the advice of Professor Barra and try to find in art something that it was forgotten by the law, because in some way the law had, at least in positive countries like Brazil, that it's descended from the Roman and Germanic culture of law. The law, as the positive law, has forgotten, let's say, the sacred place of the law in society. Then I start to think that literature could think a good connection to law in society. Well, as I said, I am not the first trying to connect law and literature. Then I approved a research project in my province where I used to live in Rio Grande do Sul, and I applied for funds in order to write this book, and I got the funds. Then I start to look for books, papers, and everything else about law and literature, and then I discovered that in America, in the USA, this is a very developed field. So then I was able to buy all these books from United States and everything else, and that was how I reached to the theme of law and literature. I must say that from 2006 and until these days, the theme is very, very important in Brazil, not because of me, because I was not the first, but because for some reason we have a big TV show about law and literature, which is presented by one of the best authors in law and society in Brazil, which was Lenny Strack. And so everybody in the law schools are now trying to connect law and literature. Of course, that there is more than that, but the question was how I reached law and literature, and that is my path. I don't know how other scholars came to the law and literature. For me, it was very important. Luis Alberto Barra, he was the guy who pushed me to find some links between law and art.
And how is the methodology that you use? Because I mean, how does the law appear in this literature?
Oh, the good thing about this research project was that in USA I found the methodology, because I had the idea. I had the sense of how to do it, but I need to find methodological tools to do it. So my luck was that in America they have 3 dimensions of law and literature. One of them is law as literature, which is the most complicated for me, because you need to understand that the parts in a court, they act like personas, the judge is acting like other, let's say, persona as well, and etc., etc., etc. And that the process, and that the judgment itself, it looks a little bit like a romance, and like a novel, you know, like Dworkin says, is something that a novel with no end, because you always can rewrite this novel. Okay, this is law as literature. You will find not too many papers or books about it, because the problem here is that the people who came from law needs to need the tools of the literature. You know, that's the less developed part of the law and literature. The other one is law in literature. This is the most developed one, because law in literature is basically to use the novels to explain the problems of the society. And then we can, there is a lot of courses giving us some tips about how to do it. This is the most developed. You will find, at least in Portuguese and in English, a lot of good works about it. I guess that in Brazil, we should pay attention more to Brazilian literature than to the foreign literature. Right now, what we are doing is about these great novels of the world, wrote by Shakespeare, wrote by all these classic authors. And I guess we should pay more attention to Camões, Saramago, which are Portuguese authors, but very important in Brazil, but also Guimarães Rosa, Érico Veríssimo, and other ones. That's the next step to the law in literature in Brazil, in my opinion. And this can be done in every part of the world, because every part of the world has its own literature as part of its culture. And the third part of the methodology is the law of literature, which is basically, let's say, authorial laws, you know, how to protect your rights, your copyrights, and etc., etc., etc. That's the way the Americans built the methodological tools to analyze law in literature, basically, that I followed in my book. In my book, I also use it because, as you know, my theoretical framework is the social systems theory of Luhmann. I also used the tools of the social systems theory in order to explain how the system of art can be connected with the system of law.
For example, do you think that in the same way that there is a link between law and literature, there's a link also between law and art, painting, sculpture, or between law and poetry? Because we have read something about poetic justice, that is like how to use the poetry in the trials to arrive to a like more humane justice or sentences, or so.
For sure, I defended this thesis, and for me, it's since I'm using the social systems theory of Luhmann, it's very easily to understand that, because if you think about a system as a differentiation of the system and of the environment, it's obviously that environment, it's always perturbating, irritating the law system. So if art is a system, and it is, it's obviously that at some point the art affects law. For sure that law must to preserve its autonomy. I'm not denying that. I'm just saying that if a system is cognitive open, it's clear that it will receive communications from other systems. This is the let's say, theoretical explanation for you, using the sociology of law to explain that. But I'd like to go further. I defended also that art is always predicting the future. If there is some place where you can find the description of the future, this place is art. Okay? The problem is that the law is always worried about the past. When a judge dictates a sentence, it's always based on past facts. When a politician produces a piece of legislation, he is based, or she is based on previously experiences, trying that in the future this experience is not going to happen again. But where I can find, for example, what is going to happen in Brazil in 2020, 2025, I will not see this kind of description in law. But I can try to see this kind of description in music, in poetry, because these are the let's say the free part of the human being. I don't know how to explain in English, but if there is some part where we develop the human sense of being connected with something else that you cannot explain, but you can feel every day in your life. This part of your life is the art. Well, you don't need to be an artist to know that. But all of us, when we have memories or when we are thinking about the future, we have memories connected or to a photo, or to a music, or to a momentum in the time where you have this great experience or with your boyfriend or your girlfriend, that you think about it in artistic way, you know. When you think about this date that you have, I don't know, 10 years ago with your first love of your life, you kind of make a novel about it, because that was not what happened. If you could come back in the time, you would see that that guy was not that beautiful as you think he was, but it was at the time, and you make some kind of imagination about it, that it makes you possible to think that that kind of reality was different. That's what art does, at least. And that's what the kind of contribution that art can give to the students of law and to the professors of law. That is my opinion. If you do this question to a judge, he would deny it, I guess.
Yeah.
But don't you think the art is about the present too?
About what?
Present, the present.
It is about the present as well. But when we start to talk about, let's say, postmodernism in law, postmodernism in art, they start to discuss this much earlier than in law. That is a fact. When you start to talk about civil rights in law, they were talking about in art much earlier. We are in Basque country. If you could see this painting of Picasso called Guernica, you don't need nothing more than that to explain what happened, the horror of a war, and etc., etc., etc. And I bet that you will not find this in a piece of legislation. This feeling that this is not justice, that this is not law. And this way to express yourself, you will find not in law, but in art. For sure that art is present. It's here, it's now, for sure. But the art is always trying to see the future, to connect to the present to the future. You can see that art is not so worried about the past. Name it the artist that is guided by the past, and you see that he will not be important in the future. Yesterday I was reading this interview made by Madonna. I don't like her songs anyway, but at some point of the interview, she said, when I kissed, what was the other singer that she kissed?
Christina Aguilera?
No.
The blonde from USA.
Christina Aguilera.
But she's from Ecuador.
Miley Cyrus? No, the other one.
Looks like a Barbie.
Yeah.
Britney Spears.
Britney
Yeah,
Spears.
exactly.
Then she said when she kissed Britney Spears in, I think, in an MTV show, everybody was horrified about it. That was 2004, 2006, I don't know. In 2014, a lot of people start to kiss on TV. You don't pay attention. A lot of kisses, a lot of, let's say, girl kisses or man kisses. Okay, but she did it first, and she said that after her, the world following women are very different. She said also that she did have that movie about her life in the tours, I don't know, On the Bed with Madonna, something like that. That was the first reality show. And now everybody is doing reality shows. The thing is that you need an artist a real artist, they are it is oriented. He is or she is oriented to the future. And if you about Picasso, for instance, in the 40s, in the 50s, people don't care about Picasso. Why? Because that kind of art that he was trying to do at that time was not understandable, you know. But in the future, it would be recognized. The same with Van Gogh, the same with, but name the important out. Shakespeare, at that time, he was recognized, but not like he is right now. At least it is my opinion about it.
The next topic that is new social movements. I find it interesting how you live in practice when you work in academics, and I am referring here to your participation in the social movements in Brazil. Tell me a little bit about how did you start joining these movements, and what are they about?
Okay. Again, I need to explain how I reached these new social movements, starting from old social movements. Okay, I told the three of you during our course here that I am a son of a general army, from the Brazilian army, and that when I was a child, we used to live in Brazil in a military dictatorship. That kind make me a little bit, that can make me, how can I say in English, but I didn't like what we are living in Brazil at that time, even being so young, because I used to live that in my house. We used to face this kind of problems because my father was against the military dictatorship, even being a general. You can imagine the problems that he faced on his life. And my grandfather, the father of my mother, he also was an army general, but he was okay with military dictatorship in Brazil. You can imagine the Sunday lunches with my grandfather and my father and my mother. That was always a problem for us. Anyway, even being so young, my experience with the dictatorship was not that good, because I have faced the problems, and my sisters always faced the problems, because being a son of an army general and a grandson of another army general, we always used to go to the schools with these bodyguards and etc., because in a way the lefty parties wants to kill us because we are the sons of the dictatorship. And in another way, we used to be protected. We needed to be protected, but from the army, because my father was against the military dictatorship. That is why I guess when I went to the law school, I chose sociology of law. I'm still not sure about it. But when I was 12 years old, it was like 86, before our democracy, our new democracy, my father opens a law office, because he studied law when and he still is a lawyer, and I went to work with him in this law office. You need to have in mind that at that time it was allowed for such young children to work in Brazil. Okay, and then with him I learned all about procedural law, civil law, penal law. I was so tired about the positive law that when I went to the school of law, the kind of courses that I liked was about sociology of law, philosophy, everything that it was not positive law, because the positive law, I knew it. I knew it in practice. As a matter of fact, I'm still a lawyer, okay? Because it's different in Brazil. I can teach and I can be a lawyer as well. I don't know in Europe, but this is permitted in Brazil. I'm just saying that because in '88, we have 86, 87, and 88, we started to discuss. No, we did not start to discuss, but in 86, 87, a new, now an old social movement, but a new social movement at the time has started in Brazil, trying to end the military dictatorship, and with the mainly goal to elect the next president. Okay, I was on the streets at that time, and that was my first experience with that. And as I told you, I was not okay with military dictatorship because of the reasons that I have explained later. But then this feeling started in Brazil that we needed freedom, we needed liberty of expression, we need all these fundamental rights that we are not experienced in Brazil at that time. What was interesting at the time is that rock songs was very important for us. That's why I wrote that book, Lorena. Anyway, then in 89 or 90, I don't remember when I started to study at the law school. I think that I started with 15 years or 16 years old. Yes, 16. And then we had this new constitution that it was saying us, you have freedom, you have liberty, we are living in a democracy. But in the real world, we are always afraid that that military dictatorship could come back and become the government again. So, on one hand, you have the law, and other hand, you have society. And that was why, in the beginning of the 90s, in Brazil, sociology of law became so important in Brazil. And that's why when I started to study sociology of law. This is my first experience with this social movement. Well, this was the latest great social movement in Brazil. The manifestations of new elections for president in Brazil. Then from 90s until 2013, what happened in Brazil was that we have discussed the role of law in society, and as a matter of fact, we are now a democracy. But let's say that we are a democracy of individual rights. Again, we have all these social rights in the 88 Constitution, but in the real world, it's not like that. But I started to teach in 2000, and I'm always telling to my students, why don't you do that? Why don't you go to the streets? Why don't you complain about it? And the answer was always like that. Why? We have a democracy. We are doing good, economically speaking. If I study the law, I can be a judge, I can be a prosecutor, and I could have a good salary, okay, and my life is done. I will have no more problems in my life. What happened was that in 2013, something has exploded in Brazil, which was the June of 2013. I must say that, like everybody in Brazil, we are not expecting that. It came out from nowhere. The funny thing is that it started in the city where I used to live in Brazil. The city is Porto Alegre. And at some point, that thing starts to happen, and I was in the middle of it. Then I remember that I talked with Renata, and we said, this is important because the young people are on the streets, and that's where we should go, because we need to go there. And then we start to participate of the manifestations. And I guess that the most important thing that we did together with Professor Saulo de Carvalho was to organize on the streets some kind of popular lecture to anyone who would like to join us and try to explain from the point of view of the criminology, of the sociology of law, and etc., what was happening in Brazil in 2013. So that's the way I was caught by this movement, because this movement, in the opposite direction of the movement of 86, 87, this movement just has exploded from nothing. Now, 2 years later, we can say why that movement, we are trying to explain why this movement happened. But in 2013, we had no idea why that kind of things were happening. So I just jumped into the problem, and I had my participation like any other else. I went to the streets, and that's what I did.
And being in the streets has shaped your point of view in the academic field?
I don't know if I understand your question, but it is about.
If it has changed your way of approaching the topics, object
okay.
of your research.
What the movement did with me was to renew my faith on my students. That's the first thing, because I was so bored with my students, because their problem was to be approved in concurso, to be a judge, and that was their problem. But now they are starting to organize themselves in order to let's say to become not only lawyers but people interested in the connections in the life society. That was what the June of 2013 means to me, academic speaking, because I wouldn't say that I changed the way I teach, I changed my researches, because I always be myself in the way that I was trying to make something connected with life society. This doesn't change. But to start to believe that, okay, I really can make a difference in the life of my student. That was the result of the June of 2013, my academic positions. For sure, that after 2013, academic speaking, the Brazilian government has sent a lot of funds for researchers in order to explain the June of 2013, to try to describe what will happen with Brazil after June of 2013. And as a researcher, not as a teacher, this is my main field right now, because it's something that I'm interested in it, and because luckily for me, it's something that the Brazilian government is always interested. So at this point of my career, what I am doing is trying to, for sure, all of you know that what I'm trying to do is trying to explain the June of 2013 in Brazil, but trying to connect it with all these new social movements around the world, thinking that this is more than a local movement, but part of I wouldn't say global movement, but a connected with no frontier society. That's pretty much what I'm doing right now.
And how do you feel when you see that, as other professors did in the past with you, you are also influencing new scholars and students?
How do I feel about it?
Are you proud of it? Do you feel that you are like awakening consciousness?
No, I wouldn't say proud. I'm too German in a way that to explain that. But what I can feel is that I'm not the only one anymore. Yeah. So I have colleagues that are doing the same. So my hope is that 10 years from now, 15 years from now, 5 years from now, we will have more students connected with the problems of society in Brazil. That's what I hope. That is what I'm hoping for.
Then the last question is about, could you explain how important for a scholar can be engaging the field of research through personal experiences, as you did?
I guess it's very important, but at some point that it is important, you need to differentiate your position as a participant of a movement and as a researcher. And this is very difficult because since you have had these experiences, you need to separate this, putting on the other side of the table, and try to explain it from the point of view of academic theories, etc., etc. That is why, for me at least, the methodological tools of sociology of law are so important to explain this movement. Otherwise, what you will do about it is a testimony of what you have been experiencing, etc., etc., etc. And in my opinion, we already have this kind of tools in order to do it. We have a lot of sociological methods to explain law in society. But if I'm asking you if I could give you an advice, for sure that if you are a sociologist of law and if there is a social movement, the place where you should be is in society, not in law. This is important for you as a researcher.
Thank you very much.
I think.
Okay, finally, as we know, the legal education is a powerful instrument not only to improve the role of lawyers, but I think to construct a better legal political culture within the society. How is the actual situation of legal education in Brazil?
That is a very good question. It is connected with everything that I have explained to Lorena and to Ainhoa. In the course of the military dictatorship, the legal education was changed in Brazil in order to train the students to follow the law. If you were a military at that time, this makes sense because if you are the one who is producing law, you don't want someone criticizing the law that you did. So basically, what the militaries did at that time was to say to the students that you need to know the positive law. That's it. That the way my father was trained when I told you that he is also a lawyer. And that, I don't know, 90 or 100% of these old lawyers, old judges in Brazil were trained. And this was a problem in Brazil after 88, because if you were thinking about a new country, a democratic country, you should left behind this kind of education. So again, that is why in the early 90s, sociology of law was so important in Brazil. Also because all this, from 85 to 90s, all these people who were claiming on the streets for liberty, etc., for freedom, for liberty of expression, they came to Europe, especially to French. That is why Foucault, Bourdieu, they are so important art authors in Brazil. they came here in order to do the PhD, etc., etc. Here in Europe, they met André Germano, Niklas Luhmann, Jürgen Habermas. Foucault was alive at that time, and that was the kind of thinking that was brought to Brazil in the early 90s. In 1994, this small group of scholars became very important in Brazil. I don't know the reason. As a matter of fact, the reason is connected with that professor from Argentina, Luis Alberto Vará, because all of them in some way or were super students of Vará, or they were connected with Vará in some way. So in 1994, this group was indicated by the Minister of Education in Brazil in order to rethink the legal education in Brazil. This is 1994. I was still in the School of Law at that time. So I was trained like a lawyer. I was trained to know the law. Okay. In 1994, after these meetings, the Minister of Education has published a piece of legislation that we call in Brazil guidelines for law curriculums. And in that guideline, the courses of Sociology of Law, Philosophy of Law became mandatory in Brazilian School of Law. This was 1994. The goal was to change the legal education in Brazil, because if we had a new constitution, we need to look the new with the eyes of a new thing, not with the eyes of an old thing. This is 1994. In 1994, we had a few schools of law in Brazil. That was another problem. If we would like to be a democratic country, we should allow to the poorest people access to the university. What happens in Brazil is that the public universities are oriented to receive the richest part of the Brazilian population. Why? Because we don't have a good public system of I don't know how to say in English, but the first and the second degree, which are in Brazil previously to the third degree, which is the high level superior education. The funny thing is that I always have studied in public schools, so I'm not the proof of what I'm saying here. But anyway, you have a problem in Brazil. The most well-educated people goes to the free public university. So the problem was that in 1994, we are training the most educated people, spending the money of the public budget to people who would go after that, act again as judges, prosecutors, etc. Then in 1996, and this is important, we start this process to open not more public universities, but to open the high-level superior education to private universities. These private universities are receiving the poorest part of Brazilian population. Let's say the less well-educated part of Brazilian education. Why I'm saying you to do all these things? Because from 96 until 2015, we have now 1,200 schools of law. That's too many, right? Do you agree? And in all these schools, Sociology of Law is a mandatory course. So the next step was not only to say in the law that Sociology of Law is needed as philosophy, but we need to train teachers properly. And from 96 to 2000, we had a very few programs of master and law doctorates in Brazil. Very, very few. That is why from 96 to 2000, you will see that a lot of Brazilians came to Europe, especially to Oñati, to do their tesinas, to do their PhD doctorates, etc., etc., etc. But after 2000, these people are coming back to Brazil from 2000 until now, and these people start to teach me, because I have entered to the master program in Brazil in '99, and I started my PhD in 2003. And in 2000, 2001, it was the first time that I have visited Oñati, because Germano was one of my supervisors of my thesis. Anyway, so from 2000 until now, what has changed in legal education in Brazil? First, a lot of students, a lot of professors, a lot of master and doctorate programs in law, a lot of, a massive explosion of the legal education. So from 2004, the Ministry of Education has done another piece of legislation, guidelines for law curriculums. And right now we are a very, very regulated system of education, especially in law. And it's a little bit different than in Europe or in Peru. Our system of education, because you need to study for 5 years at least in order to have your degree in law, etc., etc. It's different. But this piece of legislation in 2004 makes necessary to have more professors in full-time, dedicated to research and etc., and all these things. So our momentum in Brazil about the legal education in 2015 is different, because right now we are facing the problems of the privatization and of the deprivatization of the system. The problem of the privatization, for instance, is one problem that we need to face next years. Why? Because it's the private school who are doing the social inclusion of students in Brazil. This is a problem because it's private. They need to have profits. And how do this kind of universe will have profits with the poor people? Okay, this is a problem. So what is happening now? These faculties or university have been bought by American investment funds, and these funds, at least they are trying to guarantee quality. But this is a problem, to balance profits with good legal education. The other problem is about the public education, in my opinion. We must, not should, in my opinion, try to find a way to include more more peoples from the minority part of the Brazilian population, like the indigenous, like the black people. But black people are the majority in Brazil, but socially speaking, they are minority in the Brazilian public universities. That's the problem of the legal education right now in Brazil. I can see that in the future, that huge number of 1,200 School of Law will shrink, because it's impossible to maintain it. Let's see what's going to happen.
Yes, and the other question is, it was about the role of sociology of law in legal education, but well, you mentioned something like that. But yes, I would like to know what do you think about the role of sociology of law in legal education?
Okay. In the early 19th of the last century, a book wrote by André Germano was published in Portuguese. The name of the book in French was Où va la sociologie du droit? But in Portuguese, this is another book. The book that was translated, the name in French is something like Le droit trahi par la philosophie, which in English is the law betrayed by the philosophy of law. I remember that book, when I read that book, that I was so tired to discuss the theoretical point of view of the law, and at that time I found a book that was trying to say to me, you need more than that. You need more than that. And you can find here, and the place is sociology of law. Well, when I start to read that kind of books, written by Vara, by Arnaud, by Foucault, I don't know, name it, these authors of that time, I was convinced that a student in a school of law should know that, should learn that, this kind of authors. And that at least if he knew that he or she knew that these authors existed, at least he or she could have a choice. Okay, if I want to become a positivist lawyer, okay, that is up to you. But you need to know that there is another way to approach the law, which is more connected with society and anything else. That is why, for sure, I think that sociology of law is so important, and that is why I fought so long in my life in order to create the first Master in Law in Sociology in Brazil, which is the Master in Law in Society of Unilasalle. That was the first in Brazil. The other ones, they have research lines about sociology of law, but our concentration field, concentration is not a good word, but our main theme in Unilasalle is sociology of law. And if I didn't believe in that, I wouldn't put so much effort, so much time of my life in sociology of law. So if you ask me, I would start to teach sociology of law from the beginning to the end of the law course. But that is not possible anyway. So I'm okay with the fact that at least it is mandatory to the undergraduate students in Brazil.
And finally, how is the situation of the sociology of law in Brazil? Because you once you mentioned about the association of professors sociology of law. How was the process?
Okay. What happened in Brazil, again, starting in the 90s, was that we have a tradition of 20, 30 years studying law in society. The problem was that due to the fact that we had this big bang of universities oriented or facts oriented to law, the problem was to have proper professors of sociology of law. Why that was a problem? Because if you have 1,200 schools of law, at least you need 1,200 professors in sociology of law. What happened then? If you had a master degree in, let's say, civil law or penal law or in tax law, I don't know, and you are a young scholar in Brazil at the time, what would you teach sociology of law? That was the problem. Another problem is that there was always a confusion about philosophy of law and sociology of law in Brazil. I know that this kind of confusion is the same in other countries, but in Brazil it was big, this discussion. They put in the same bag. They used to put in the same bag authors like Habermas and Luhmann. Habermas for me is a philosopher of law, and Luhmann is a sociologist of law. That's one example, but this kind of, I don't know how, but in Brazil they say that Heidegger can be discussed in sociology of law. It is not. He's one of the most important authors ever, but in philosophy. Okay, so what we have discussed for years in Brazil is that, sociologically speaking, we need to act as an institution. We need to we need to organize ourselves in order to make us visible as sociologists of law. We are not the first. Remember that I told you that we have this 90 generation, this 2000 generation. What we did was learning with the mistakes made in the past, that we should make an organization that with the goal to reunite people who are dedicated to study only sociology of law. When we did that in 2010, and how we did that? With the help of the research committee in sociology of law, and with the help of the people of the Oñati Institute. Vittorio Jati, Pierre Bentif, and other, David Nelkan, we invited them to come to Brazil, and we reunited these people who are interested in sociology of law in Brazil in the city of Niterói in Rio de Janeiro. And then there we created this association. We had 50 or 60 people in this meeting. That the Brazilian National Associations of Researchers in Sociology of Law, that's the name, started in 2000. And the goal, as I said, it's nothing else than to know each other. We would like to know who were studying sociology of law. From 2010 to 2011, I was the president, and my function was to create the association, to get funds, a very bureaucratic process. Okay. When we did that, we start to make meetings every year, and we establish working groups. The research committee here is the kind of the model that we are following. You know, we have research groups, etc., etc. In 2015, 5 years later, in the Brazilian meeting that Lorena will be there with us, we have received we have enrolled 835 people interested in sociology of law. It's too much. And we have received more than 600 abstracts. So 5 years late, the result is incredible of this Brazilian National Association. My advice for you, young scholar, is that if you are a sociologist of law, if you know the socio-legal theories, please remember, at least Bourdieu, that you must be in the field, that you need to be important, that if you want to be heard, create something.
Yes,
be important.
Yes, I would like to do something in Peru. It's necessary to
But
do something in every country.
Yes, I like the philosophy of the punk rock songs. You can do it for yourself. You too. It's 2015. What is the problem? it's do it. Start. Well, this can be wrong, yes, but at least you tried. That's what we did in Brazil, and it worked. In 2010, we are a bunch of crazy scholars trying to do something. Nobody respect us at that time. 5 years late, we have a position in the Brazilian Council Education when becomes to discuss legal education in Brazilian government. They sent us letters. They asked us. At least we are heard, you know. That was the function of Brazilian National Association.
I think it's
We
a
have
good
a
example.
journal as well, etc. And all these things that an association needs to do it to be heard.
I think in my opinion, it's a good example in Brazil. Brazil is a good example for us, for Peruvian people, actually, for Peruvian students and lawyers to do a change, improve the role of them.
Yeah, and it is better for you to do it because comparing to Brazil, you are a small country. Comparing to Brazil, I know that Peru is not that. I'm going to Peru next month, by the way.
Great.
Cusco. I'm very happy to go
Machu
to
Picchu.
Machu Picchu. I've never been there before.
Obligatory visit.
Anyway, I guess that you can contact people who want to study sociology of law easily than in Brazil, because if I live in the south of Brazil and I have to contact a scholar from the north, thanks to internet, right now I can do it. But if I want to meet him, it's like 9 hours flying. So that is why we are doing always a Brazilian meeting.
Brazil is not a country; it's a continent.
No, it's a large country, you know. But it's. I guess that in Peru, the work can be done easily than in Brazil, or in your countries, or in Basque country.
Yes,
I don't know, but here you already have Oñati. You don't need something like that.